So this is the most important topic we could discuss during these days that we're together, and probably in our lives, as I understand it. That my whole life changed when I came to clarity for me about this thing that some people call God. Who and what that is and how that works in our lives. We started this discussion yesterday and began to look at some things preliminarily. And among what we looked at, as you will recall the other day, is what is God's purpose? What's God up to? What's going on? And God's purpose in our lives, as opposed to the larger reason for life itself being the way it is, which is what Yvonne was talking about. But what is God's purpose, or how does God function in our lives? I should really put it that way, because as I moved through that sentence, I realized that in my mind, function and purpose are two different things. Function is what we're doing, and purpose is why we're doing it. Yes? Function is what we're doing. Purpose is why we're doing it. So I think what I'm talking about now is, at this point, is what is God's function? That is, what does God do, this thing that we call God? And I think we kind of concluded the other day that what God does is empower us. And what God empowers us to experience is God empowers us to be, do, or have whatever we choose. That's a big agenda, and it's hard for some people to believe, but it has been my experience, and it is my awareness. Now, why God does that is the answer to your question, and we'll get to that in a minute, but just table that for just a moment and stay for just now with what God does. God empowers us to be, do, or have anything that we choose. And that leads, of course, to questions. How does God do that? Those questions are answered, as you know, in the Conversations with God cosmology, but they are very specifically answered all in one place. I mean, they're answered in the 9 CWG books, but the answers are, to be fair, scattered throughout the dialogue. You got to pick them up here and pick them up there. In Happier Than God, the answers have been brought together in one book with more material added, which is why I'm insisting that you read that book, because it's all there between the covers of one document in a highly concentrated and a very logical progression as well. But I will share with you here what I know about that, just anecdotally and informationally, and then I'll trust that you will, in fact, pick up the book. It'll be out here in about 6 or 7 weeks. You can pre-order it, and it'll be in your hands just days after it's published. By the way, another reason that I really want you to read the material is you'll be teaching it. I promise you, you'll be teaching it. When you read it, you'll say, this, I got to work into my teaching. It's just too good. It's too specifically focused and too good not to teach it. Happier Than God tells us that a number of basic things. Number 1, there is a God. Number 2, God has no preference in the matter of how life works out. Number 3, God is therefore a disassociated, detached form of energy that we call God. But it is more than just energy. I don't want you to think that it's just energy like electricity, for instance. It is energy, but it is energy with consciousness. That is, if you can conceive of it, it is energy with awareness that contains an awareness of itself, as opposed to, again, electricity or gravity or whatever, which one might argue does not have self-awareness. It just is. But the energy that is God is not simply raw energy. It is that, but it is not simply that. It is raw energy that knows that it is raw energy, that it is raw energy that is aware of itself. It contains consciousness. Indeed, one could argue that the energy is consciousness, that is the energy, consciousness. And when I say consciousness, I mean to define consciousness as the ability to be aware of itself. Self-awareness. And it understands itself to be the self of which it is aware is everything that is, seen and unseen. That is the self of which God is aware. God is that. That is God. And God has imbued the self of which it is aware with varying levels of its highest quality, which is self-awareness. All life forms move through a process called, not just all life forms, all life, all of life, is currently involved in a process called evolution. Moving from, and evolution might be loosely described as the movement from lower states to higher states of self-awareness or higher states of consciousness, or if you please, higher states of self-realization. And that the highest state of consciousness could be described as the state in which we realize ourselves. And I like to use the trick word there, to realize ourselves, that is to make ourselves real, to realize ourselves, to make who we are real in our experience. That, it seems to me, is the highest state of consciousness. Or to put it another way, the highest state of consciousness is to know profoundly and completely who you are and to experience and express that. That is, to know that in your experience. This is the yearning and the goal of all of life, if life indeed has a goal at all. Or to put it in non-humanistic terms, because electricity doesn't have a goal. Gravity doesn't have a goal, it just is. So to put it in non-humanistic terms, this is the process. It's not really, in a sense, a goal-oriented process, because we've already discussed that God has no preference in the matter. It's just what happens. It's just what happens. Just as electricity can shock you if you get in contact with it in the wrong way. Electricity doesn't mean to shock you. It is not electricity's goal to shock you. It's just what happens. It's just what happens. Part of the process. So the process of life is a process of evolution, the end result of which is, as opposed to the goal, the end result of that process is the reaching of a level of awareness that is aware of itself. That is, it is aware that it is aware. And it has come to know itself in its own experience. It knows what it is, and it is knowing that experientially and not simply conceptually. Now, this might all remain pretty theoretical and therefore, at some level, perhaps even non-interesting, if not irrelevant, to the human experience if we didn't know that we are not only part of that process, we are the process itself, playing itself out. We are the playing out of that process in this particular form called the human species and physical life.